Everything with consciousness has light, sound, and electromagnetics in a certain shape, a certain geometric pattern around the body, and in certain sound or tonality. And so the raising of consciousness is essentially about creating symmetry, geometry, and harmony. Those three things together in this field around the body that are running like cleaner and leaner and smooth and sort of operating almost like a Tesla amp, like operating as a freestanding radiant energy. Scalar wave technology, standing wave technology. We were meant to be these little nodes that are connected to the oneness of all that ever was.
Mickaela Grace is the founder of Graceline Institute and Bridge 11 Productions. Her spiritual journey began at a young age, and she has spent the past 25 years traveling the world, studying with masters in over 32 different traditions. In this conversation, we discuss the power of taking full responsibility of your consciousness expansion so that you can become the true master of your experience.
And if we want to raise consciousness, the path to actually exploring our own consciousness that is the fastest, leanest, cleanest, is to take full responsibility for the self and full responsibility for emotionality, for personality, how we show up in reality, for judgment, for perspective, through how we interpret abstract data sets through our eye is passed through the filter of every emotional experience we've ever had.
Mickaela believes a big part of the consciousness journey is recognizing the role we're playing in creating our experience. This starts to become more obvious as awareness expands.
And I need to understand how to tesseract time and how to be in this present moment, this eternal now, to say I'm at will for what I'm creating, what I'm causing, what I'm magnetizing, what I'm manifesting. I'm 100% responsible for it. And my old calcified memory and the tears, right, or the soul loss or the event that's still stuck in my system, like bad computer code, is running a pattern over and over again that is on repeat until I interrupt it.
Mickaela believes that cleaning up our emotions and tapping into the power of the heart may just be the most powerful approach there is.
The point of all of that is that the feelings we feel are 5,000 times more magnetic and 100 times more electrical than the thoughts we think. Your unresolved feelings, or the home base emotion in terms of your emotional intelligence, that is your set point of the like the song or the sound that you're emanating off your body, that like tone that you emanate from the heart is the frequency at which you will interpret the world. Like getting into the heart and having insight of the heart and cleaning up the heart space is actually what will change the lens by which you view the world. And so it's not about changing perspective through the eye line or the ear line or the storyline. It's about changing it through the heart line.
Before we get into this conversation, I want to ask you to join this amazing community of consciousness explorers. This whole idea of pursuing expanded consciousness and the boundaries of human potential while living a modern life is relatively new, which is why we interview revered masters, teachers, experts, and practitioners to help you on your own journey. To stay up to date on the latest conversations, simply click subscribe below and you'll be notified each time a new episode comes out. I am so grateful for all of your support and comments. I love reading them. Now let's dive into this conversation. Hey, Mickaela, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm great. I feel the energy of your greatness right now. I love it.
Thank you. I'm very happy. I'm in my hometown in Park City, Utah, so things are always happier when I'm in the mountains.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, we'll talk more kind of about, from a metaphysical perspective, maybe why that is in this conversation. But really where I wanted to jump off with you was just, I've heard you talk a lot about kind of raising consciousness, ascension practices. What does raising consciousness mean to you?
Well, so in terms of, being the founder of an emotional intelligence and consciousness school, in terms of really looking at emotional intelligence, which can be measured like the wattage of a light bulb or volts of a battery, any being that is sentient and is feeling and is alive on the planet has natural innate waveform technology in them, meaning everything with consciousness has light, sound, and electromagnetics in a certain shape, a certain geometric pattern around the body, and in certain sound or tonality. And so the raising of consciousness is essentially about creating symmetry, geometry, and harmony, those three things together in this field around the body that are running like cleaner and leaner and smooth and sort of operating almost like a Tesla amp, like operating as a freestanding radiant energy, scalar wave technology, standing wave technology. We were meant to be these little nodes that are connected to the oneness of all that ever was. And really, all intelligence is essentially collective intelligence, and all consciousness is unified consciousness. And so when we talk about raising that or ascending that, we're getting out of catabolic or destructive or debase emotionality, personality, thinking, frozen or static, kind of calcified memory or events that freeze us up in the field. And we're getting into higher movement, mobility, light quotient, sound quotient, but really geometry, which I know is trippy for the mind to wrap its brain around, but cleaner geometry begets higher harmony begets stronger geometry. So those things go hand in hand.
Well, it's cool to hear you talk about this, because I did have a conversation recently with the founder of Qualia Research Group. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, but they basically are a group of consciousness researchers, and they similarly talked about how this can kind of all be expressed in math, and that as the geometry is kind of returned to its original essence, there's a greater capacity for things just to flow.
Yeah.
There's an easier coherence in the system, because the energy that we are it's kind of like there's a clear, smooth path for it, versus like all these little kind of fragmentations that, show up in our experience in different ways.
Yeah. So in speaking to that, what I would say is that if we live in a cosmos, right, or a world where everything is unified and everything is connected, and we're all sort of made of the same stuff, right? Like your body is essentially just borrowed minerals, doesn't mean that much about your worth, right? Like our body image isn't a quantifier or qualifier of our essence or our virtue or our worth, but we're borrowed stardust and borrowed minerals, and we're just like salts and water and all that jazz, but with consciousness poured into it. So we can approach understanding self, other, or the cosmos. We can approach it through so many different angles, and we're all kind of talking about the same things. So in terms of spiritual sciences, you can talk to a theoretical physicist, neuroscientist, a biologist, a geologist, and you can really start looking at base math and equation and really approach it from the left brain and see the order, the defined order and organization and everything. Or you can approach it from a very right brain, artistic, sonic, artful, beautiful kind of view of the world, and you'll get the same epiphanies, right? You'll get the same organization. You'll get the same sense of connection. But absolutely, there is math creating organization in all things. And when we really understand like the Mandelbrot set and we understand fractal geometry, we're all just subset and repeating ratio coming from a source equation. And so everything is sort of stacked in a fractalized universe, and we're all connected more than we think. And any experience that we have of another being is a reflection or a mirror of our own experience. And not to be super wild from the very start of this phone call, but when we also start looking at DNA as being holographic, the human eye operating like the physics of a black hole, DNA literally being a little node that is holographic and alive, also operating like a black hole, you start to understand that there's a mirror image, right? So if we go to like the ultimate creation of the universe, to like the original photon, right? And that everything is emanating a geometric structure from that place, from that original light. Your DNA is sending and receiving signal all the time. So even biologically, we are literally like a living piece of communication. And from a consciousness perspective, that's kind of all there is. We're just a liquid plasma that is sending and receiving information back to a source energy all the time. So when we look at that through the eyes or the lens of mathematics, we're a repeating, organized, beautiful stream of mathematics. It's like another angle of saying the same thing. So I agree with all those mathematicians in your life.
Nice. Well, that very beautifully and eloquently put. And there is a part of my own experience where, yeah, you start to see how reality is a reflection of lots of information that exists subconsciously within yourself. And how can we start to recognize that? And how can we work with that once we have that kind of recognition?
Yeah, well, my one liner for that, like as a performance poet, I can take any of the very left brain, super geeky, super nerdy sort of lessons and curriculum from our institute and also deliver the same data through an interactive art experience or through poetry or through fractal films or meditation or live breathwork and ceremony, that sort of thing. But the one liner of poetry that answers your question, I think, in the simplest way, is that true sovereignty requires full responsibility. And so if we actually want to enact like free will and agency, and if we want to raise consciousness, the path to actually exploring our own consciousness that is the fastest, leanest, cleanest is to take full responsibility for the self and full responsibility for emotionality, for personality, how we show up in reality, for judgment, for perspective, through how we interpret abstract data sets through our eye is passed through the filter of every emotional experience we've ever had. So we're passing like a stream of raw data through the lens or the filter of what we've endured or what we've experienced in life. And then we're turning abstract data into meaning, abstraction into meaning, abstraction into meaning. And then we're projecting that through the eyes out into the world. And then we get a reflection of what we expect. And so you can go look at an artist's abstract work, like even throwing splatters of paint on a wall, and the frequency, the vibration, the home base or home tone of someone's emotional intelligence, that artist who splattered the paint is sending a waveform emanation out into that work, and it can be felt. So you can feel the frequency of a movie you're watching. You can feel the frequency of a song. You can feel, even in an abstract piece of art, you can feel the vibration at which it was made. And that is really a little algorithm coming from consciousness, right? Coming from emotionality. And so if we want to actually raise consciousness and really become the best versions of ourselves, there's this double helixed process of the more we kind of do our personal work and release ourselves from old event and catabolic emotion and raise consciousness, the freer we are, the more agency. And the more agency and freer we are, the more we raise our consciousness. So those two things are really helix together in a really beautiful dance.
I've never thought about that helix characterization. That totally makes sense to me. So this process of kind of healing our old wounds and stories, what have you found most effective for that can kind of put us on the upward spiral of this helix path?
Well, shameless plug, the curriculum at my institute is FAST, right? So we've taken like ageless wisdom, the most cutting edge science, ancient practices, ancient art, but really temple technology from around the world. And at these sacred sites, which are electromagnetic, like nodal points on this wider grid around Earth and sort of housing and showcasing the Kundalini energy of the Earth that can basically tune us like an instrument to activate our own Kundalini. Using all those technologies, I had just found that our particular system, which is directly from temples, which I believe in great laterality and equanimity belong to everyone. So our curriculum is based on that idea of like, how do we drop personal narrative, raise emotional intelligence, get actual trauma out of the body, reset the vagus nerve, and amplify our ability to like reboot to factory settings like we would on a phone. Like, oh, I've got a glitch in the software I'm running on this hardware. Well, if you think about your stories, your narrative, your life experience as being sort of like glitchy software, it's just the programs we're running, the patterns we're running. We want to reboot using the hardware and just get like an upgrade to the broadcast signal. So doing our personal work does that. We have 6 modules that are based on Flower of Life technology that are creating certain competencies. So, and those competencies are raising emotional intelligence, EQ, BQ, which is a body intelligence and using the wisdom of the body to reboot, reset, reframe events. TQ, which is a truth quotient, training us to give and receive the truth in a totally different way, raising the caliber of that. and then an IQ quotient that is like mystery school teachings, ancient science, ancient wisdom, like resetting the body to regain and reclaim all of that. And then these are obviously like little quotients that I made up. It's my naming for it. But KQ, which is a kindness quotient, which gets people back into balance with ecology and how to be kind and how to serve the planet, how to find their soul work, how to be like, if you're an entrepreneur, like how can I be best of service? How can I be on greater mission? And ROI, energy, frequency, manifestation will always, in my view, follow service. So the higher and cleaner the waveform technology, then the more energy it begets, right? And so, and then the final quotient is a GQ quotient, which is grace, where I believe our outward conduct matches our inner virtue because we've stabilized all those competencies. So we can be in high performance leadership. We can be at higher creativity, higher invention, higher progression. So for thought leaders and free thinkers around the world, it's not just great for business. It's not just great for community. It's really, truly a liberating factor to employ your own agency. Like, I actually want my free will. I want my unbridled creativity to come to the surface. So I've got to get out of wounding, and I've got to get out of narrative, and I've got to get out of like calcification and the trappings of three-dimensional reality.
It's such a fundamental point to recognize that our perception mechanism is one that is like through a pattern wounded experience, right? We're seeing a very fractional view of reality and information in any situation, yet it's so difficult to understand that until you have really kind of experienced that. How have you helped people kind of like, is there an example that you give that helps people grasp this idea that like their mental experience is viewing things through a very fractional perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, just to give an image first before an example, if we actually start to believe that we are a living piece of art, but we also have structure, like we're a piece of architecture, right? So if you think about, and the reason I want people thinking through that lens is to see that there is geometric form, right? There's a living toroidal field around your body, whether you call that a light body, a Merkaba, a morphogenetic field, an electromagnetic field, there is shape, right? And that shape is highly, has high symmetry and geometry to it and is highly organized. So when we have an event that knocks us off center, it's like being a little cattywampus. So imagine you can put the prettiest roof on your house, right? Like, and you can get all the highest materials, highest quality, like have the greatest invention, greatest intention, greatest like plans that I drew, right? But if the foundation is wonky, you can't build stable structure, and you really can't build something that is long lasting. And if we want happiness, or vitality, longevity, if we want to like biohack the body, right? Which I don't think we should be hacking into Mother Nature. She's divine. Bioharmonizing the body, right? Is a little bit better. This idea that like we don't need to attack. So getting people out of that right versus wrong, red versus blue, me versus you duality phase, even thinking of ourselves as broken and we have to fix it. We're really like looking at, again, our life as a piece of art and our body or our experience as consciousness being poured into a body that is a piece of architecture. So if we can clean that up, it provides a lot of freedom. And so the easiest example that I have of that is that, or the simplest example is that a lot of us believe that essentially this event that happened to us, we kind of know it altered us. We might know that there's actually a tear in the electromagnetic field, right? And this is not a woo-woo thing like a shaman might call this soul loss, but we can actually, in the same way we photograph the tear in the ozone layer around the geometry, right? It should be a closed system with atmospheric pressure. We can see the micro tear and we can see the data breach, right, of information going in and out. In the basically a breaching of that closed system. So when you have a traumatic event you haven't fully healed from, there's a breach or a tear in that system. But from my curriculum, what I teach is that you store information on 6 different hard drives, not on a shared server. So most people go about their world passing everything through that filter without knowing it. So if you understand autonomic response, right, The quick sentence, one liner I have for this is, when you brace, you race. If we have an event we haven't fully healed from and we're braced for impact and we have flight, fight, freeze, or appease of like, I'm going to fight that thing because I expect it to come around again. I'm going to run away from that thing because I expect it to come around again. Or I'm going to go into total paralysis and freeze, or I'm going to give everyone outside of me what they want and I'll appease them in order for that thing to not happen again. So in the negation of that, like, oh, I want that thing to be a not, right? We actually magnetically are calling it to us. And so when we brace for impact, we race to outcome until we actually can bioharmonize the fourth dimensional wall, right? Or block to our consciousness, which is understanding how to bend time. Like really to bend space time and realize, oh, I'm front loading an expected future based on the wound of a past. And I need to understand how to tesseract time and how to be in this present moment, this eternal now, to say, I'm at will for what I'm creating, what I'm causing, what I'm magnetizing, what I'm manifesting. I'm 100% responsible for it. And my old calcified memory and the tears, right, or the soul loss or the event that's still stuck in my system, like bad computer code, is running a pattern over and over again that is on repeat, right, until I interrupt it. So one of the acronyms that I use to teach this from the Institute is it will curl back around in space-time. And curl is literally a conscious or unconscious repeat or loop in space-time, right? Literally these curls that curl back around in spherical time, because I am this sweet little fissure of source and I have the potential to create the world. So the reality I expect to find, I'm actually literally calling to me in the fabric of space-time over and over and over again. So an example of how this can liberate someone is that imagine that event never happened. What if I'm running no faulty code? And what if I can get back to childlike innocence, as if I was never laughed at the moment I got on stage, right? Or as if I never had that bike accident that made me miss a year of school, that made me feel like I'm not smart and I'm behind everyone. What if I told a whole different story about the way I function in the world? Well, then I would enter into almost every conversation expecting a different outcome. So 100% that can change reality, right? Because you're entering into every conversation being a different version of you, being someone who's not expecting trauma. So I'm never very fast with my answers, but that's a fast example of how it can impact like your kind of day to day.
Yeah, we got plenty of time. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a lot of people might hear this and they might think, wow, this sounds horrible. Like I'm creating all the bad shit in my life. But actually, there is like such a beautiful part of this, which is that the events of life are intended to bring us back to healing. Mm-hmm. All these situations are just us allowing us to see ourselves more clearly. And when we embrace that opportunity or take full responsibility, as you say, it's a gift because we're just seeing the distortions one by one mm-hmm. through the events of life. And that to me is a very empowering way to live versus just experiencing reality as randomness.
Yeah. And think about how this is a strange example, but think about how we draw a more cohesive map when we have more cameras or angles on an event. So we have like crime being solved faster because we had so many cameras on an event that we can like fill in the gaps and make the puzzle pieces come together in a more rapid way. So I don't think spiritual work has to be hard or looking at our bad stuff. And I don't even think we need to look at it as distortion fields as much as we need to realize with great sweetness that we need each other. And the reason that I need you as my friend is to offer reflection back to self. And the more that I can see all feedback as feed forward, and the more that I can allow as many people's perspective and diverse opinion into my field, I'm getting a more cohesive way of viewing the world. And I'm getting more nodes on the geometry to get a holistic system coming into view. So I can love myself easier, know myself easier, be a more well-rounded human when I have a geometry that is the whole earth of self, right? The whole planet of self, literally well-rounded. And so I think this idea that we need to lean into community more and we need to essentially in the same way that we would reboot the microbiome by getting diversity in the biome, and that's where true immunity exists. We need that level of diversity, like diverse opinion, diverse view of myself, diverse reflection of myself. We need to get out of our comfort zone. We need hermetic stress. We need to get as many people, sort of like it takes a village to raise Mickaela. We need as many people to come together and just offer insight. And rather than trying to learn through hindsight or brace for impact of dangerous foresight, we need insight, which is one of the trinities of our institute as well. So this idea of like, wow, insight comes from being in this present moment, willing to learn, curious to learn, and not shielded and not, in a power struggle in any way, and not certain. This idea of like certainty, I already know. Well, that creates like a brittleness in nature, right? That which is brittle breaks, that which is fluid thrives in the sense of the Tao. So having a very fluid idea of self, like a fluid identity, and like, you know, the sense of like plasma physics, literally, we're a fluid, right? So like, can I have a fluid relationship to the world where I'm always learning something new? And the flexibility that keeps us young, like flexibility of joints and synovial fluid being a fluid, but like the flexibility of musculature and soft tissue. We need flexibility of mind and heart and spirit as much as we need that to keep evolving. And I'm going all over the map with that, but I think that
So we're being flexible and flowing as we speak.
Yeah. So the point is to just get as many eyes on your existence as possible. And rather than thinking of spiritual work as work, I think bringing levity and fun to it and seeing it as just like the most badass ride possible. Like, this is a trippy ride. So like, we might as well have levity and laughter and fun in the fact that like, we're nuts, right? And this place is nuts, and we're just trying to harmonize it as much as possible.
Yeah, it's such a good point. It's to me, it really is the adventure of a lifetime, and I've done a lot of shit in this world, and have not found anything as rich or enjoyable as the continuous journey of self-discovery. One of the questions I had for you as you brought up insight is, what is your perspective on the relationship between insight and the opening or condition of the heart?
Well, I think the heart is the more pure instrument. But I am a nerd, so I look at that through the lens of electromagnetics, right? So, and this is sort of like very great science that's out there that I highly recommend anyone study, but we know that essentially the human brain is so powerful, right? What we expect we find. And we know that like with the placebo effect and the nocebo effect and the beautiful work of like Dr. Joe Dispenza, for example, trying to get people to like understand the impact of positive thinking on outcome versus the impact of negative thinking on outcome. Well, if we know the brain is that powerful, I mean, think about it. People use their minds to create wild, beautiful things out there in the world. But the heart, the human heart, has these 40,000 specialized brain cells called sensory neurites that essentially are like a mimetic strip or a big old magnet, like literally the heart not just being a pump, but being an actual engine and a magnet that magnetizes what we expect in the world. And the point of all of that is that the feelings we feel are 5,000 times more magnetic and 100 times more electrical than the thoughts we think. So your unresolved feelings, or the home base emotion in terms of your emotional intelligence, that is your set point of the like the song or the sound that you're emanating off your body, that like tone that you emanate from the heart is the frequency at which you will interpret the world. And so like getting into the heart and having insight of the heart and cleaning up the heart space is actually what will change the lens by which you view the world. And so it's not about changing perspective through the eye line or the ear line or the storyline, in my opinion. Again, these are all my words. It's about changing it through the heart line. So like, oh, if I up level the heart line, then I am changing the ear line, the eye line, the storyline, and I'm creating a stronger trinity there. If I can actually be in my heart, understand my heart, heal my heart, and be enzymatic. Yes, I made up that word. Not olytic, oroboric, enzymatic, and know that I am literally like the Ouroboros, like swallowing its own tail. When we look at ancient temples in Egypt, we see, like, even the Parthenon in Greece that copied everything from Egypt, we see this like parthogenesis, this idea of like the scarab beetle can like have immaculate conception and can birth itself, right? And the keys to the universe hidden in all of that code is that we are pregnant with self all the time. You're birthing self all the time. You are the only one that is creating your reality. And so your heart and how you basically process the world electromagnetically, sonically, tonally, and through light quotient itself, what are you emanating? What's the frequency by which you are like a bright light and a bright heart in the world, or a contracted, protected, dense, little tight energy in the world, right? Can we be expansive or are we tight? So using the heart itself as a way to measure our own capacity to be in the world in a bigger, braver, more beautiful way is, again, I always come back to that double helix idea, is like there's your heart and the world doing a dance all the time. And through that is insight, but the insight is you sending and receiving signal and making meaning of it, right? So what you think you're seeing is being front loaded by where the heart began before you ever laid eyes on a thing.
Sounds quite fundamental, I would say. And the question that's coming up for me is like, or something that I would love your opinion on, is I was listening to a podcast recently about just this kind of like innate heart technology that we all have, and the magnetic field, and how that often, as that kind of increases, it's like that's when like the synchronicities and all of these things happen in our life, because our literal magnetism is stronger.
Yeah.
And so we're actually bringing in experiences from our kind of inner consciousness from the outer world. And it really can kind of come back to magnetics.
Yeah, for sure. So in terms of like looking at magnetics and looking at like the heart zone, I think it's more about coherence. And I'm going to stray from the heart for just a moment to talk about, like, we always get this idea of Kundalini energy, like two snakes of white light from the sacrum, right, that are sitting dormant. And if you look at the field as a torus, then instead of something sitting in an upside down triangle, it should actually look like this, like the base of a tree, the roots of a tree, where things can then spin. So you've got like the top of your head should go up and out, the base should go down. Mm-hmm. So, and the heart is the engine in the center that's keeping the fruition of that torus, right? But I want to talk about the fact that you have this like transmitter and receiver also built into this antennaed stack of how you relate to the world. And so we've got to look at C1, C2, right, in the cervical spine, and essentially thinking of like the pineal gland and its relationship to the atlas, right, and how we change direction and the sending and receiving of signal. And so the heart is sending a signal and then receiving reality based on that signal. But we also need to like decalcify the pineal gland and not have fluoride in our toothpaste or fluoride in the water. And we've got to take responsibility for like the chemicals we're putting into our food, air, and water supply. And can we actually like bring ourselves back online to be able to not just live in the heart because we're cleaning up emotion, but we've got to clean up the planet because we've installed all of these blocks to us being able to connect to higher consciousness, right? To essentially send and receive signals from everything out there in the world that is our birthright to do without getting in our own way. So interference is maybe sometimes us getting in our own way. Interference might be others perhaps getting in our way. Interference might be the world that we created. And I believe there's never a them, but an always only us. We are the ones. So we can't blame parents or a government or, like we can't get into conspiracy theories about good and evil and that sort of thing. It's just all distraction. We need to realize that the world is us reflecting us back to us, and we're fully responsible for it. So as you ask about the heart, I always want to expand into these other connective threads to the heart, because the heart can only do what it's meant to do if you are a clean antenna to send and receive signal, if you are grounded, and if you got a root structure too, and if you have common sense as much as you have intuition. And, if you have like essentially trauma response, or you disassociate a lot, or your nervous system is out of whack, and we can't stay in the body, or we need to like reset the vagus nerve, we're not a reliable narrator, right? And we don't have an electrical current that can keep us in the heart, living from the heart, if we keep stepping in and out of the body, or if we're passing everything through the filter of ancient trauma. So we've got to clean up all of the ways in which those things connect so that we can have a momentum field of sending and receiving clean signal all the time. And sometimes with like psychedelics, for example, people go have peak experience where they like go way far out and connect to something. And my dream of that is that they're not escaping the body and going way far out as much as they sometimes do, but taking whatever intelligence or whatever epiphany or whatever beauty that they see out there and embodying it in the body and somehow bringing it back here, because we need everyone being here and we need everyone helping each other and helping the earth and cleaning up. Kind of the chemical load or chemical tone out there is also a chemical load and a chemical tone in here. And so that like micro, macro, the there and the here really has to be balanced. And so when you ask me about the heart, I can't talk about the heart without also talking about all of that.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point that it is a complete equation, right? Like you have to take care of the physical instrument for the consciousness and heart to function. You have to take care of the consciousness and heart for the physical instrument to function. Like these things are all interrelated, and it is it's something that we can integrate. We can bring them together in how we think about kind of uplifting our life.
Yeah, for sure.
I hope you're enjoying this conversation so far. If you like what you hear, let me know by clicking like, subscribing to the channel, and responding with a comment around something that you found interesting in the conversation so far. In addition to these videos, I do a lot of writing on the exploration of consciousness and my own personal revelations in my newsletter called Consciousness: The Doorway to Human Evolution. To receive these updates and more, all you need to do is simply head to the link in the description below and you'll be added to the community of 20,000 plus consciousness explorers receiving weekly ideas and inspiration in their inbox. I look forward to hearing from you there. Now let's get back to the show. A question that I was curious about. So I know you've talked at length about just kind of David Hawkin's work, the map of consciousness. I've spent a lot of time with that. So is one way to think about that kind of the energetic frequency or measures that he proposes in his scale as a reflection of the state of the heart, or is it more comprehensive than that?
Well, first of all, I think he was a genius and one of my favorite thinkers. But his work has also evolved so much because we have like cutting edge science that keeps pointing back to how accurate his chart was. So you could literally overlay the Vitruvian Man, you could overlay the human spine, you can overlay dimension and dimensionality, right? Onto that chart. And you will see that not only is being in the heart and graduating beyond duality into unconditionality, laterality, like I'm neither less important nor more important than anyone else, right? We're lateral figures in this dance. And what I do to you, I do to me. The same way, like how I pollute the water, if we're all in unified shared waters, we're all drinking shared waters, what I do to the water, what I do to you, I do to me. So when you look at his scale, you can see that as people raise consciousness, they're raising not only like chakra awareness in the body, they're cleaning up sort of this temple, but they're also playing in the field of higher dimension. And all of those things relate, even the chakras relate to dimension. So, but what I love about his scale is you can get super nerdy with it. And you can also look at the fact that the golden mean and the Fibonacci sequence are embedded in it. Like he found, separate from all of that, he kept muscle testing and testing like 100 bodies to make sure that he was getting clean numbers. And the way that he used kinesiology was brilliant, using the heart to get that binary code of a yes and a no, truth from falsehood, you name it. But this idea that there's like 12 realized beings, on the planet, and these counterbalances that happen. But these 12 realized beings, and when one passes away, human evolution or consciousness will have another replace it, like cells in an organism performing a function and doing their job. So what happens is we're all so unified that you see this repeating ratio and equation and sort of math, but you all see like all of us on this trajectory for growth. But when someone is that stable and that bright light, or they're a thought leader, or maybe they're an entrepreneur and they're like, disrupting an industry and creating something that we're like, how did we ever live without this thing, right? When you invent something new, you're driving all of culture forward, all of consciousness forward. Well, in that same sense of like, we can't function without our sun. And by the way, like, if you think about what a torus actually is, it's a system that feeds itself, that is limitless, never ending, right? So in a fractalized universe, we understand that we're a subset from source, that is basically self-sustaining and never ending, self-sustaining and never ending. So the sun is a limitless energy, self-sustaining, never ending. So is the earth, right? Mother Earth is like, oh, I'll feed all the babies and hatch all the eggs. And I don't say that, a crocodile is less than a midge fly, right? She's just letting all the babies hatch because she is a toroidal Tesla coil of limitless energy, free energy, right? That is endless, never ending, never beginning. And so when we look at our own consciousness like that, and we look at Hawkins' scale, he's actually sort of talking about this limitless free energy, or this self-sustaining sort of circulatory system of consciousness, where certain people are moving up the scale and it's coming back around. And some people have such big invention, or they are a bright light, or they're serving such a purpose that they're like a sun, they're like a planet, and they're emanating so much light and so much stability, geometry, ability, right? Harmony, that the rest of us can kind of draft off of them. And it's like bright sunlight, right? And so it's feeding the world in a really beautiful way. And think about how great the world would be if so many of us endeavored to be that. Like, wow, what if my self-worth is self-sustaining, my generosity is self-sustaining, my kindness is self-sustaining, and I'm not knocked off center and identity by what you think of me. And like, I can feel stable and able no matter what comes toward me, right? Well, when we've got a lot of adults in the room, everything gets a little bit easier, and we have stronger leadership and stronger things to follow. And then we make more responsible products, and we launch, more harmonic, not just industries, but businesses falling under industries, and we branch out into new industry. So all of that is tied to consciousness, and Hawkins' scale is sort of showing that it's almost like a ladder, an ascensional ladder, which DNA also looks like a ladder being twisted, right, in spherical time. So no one is better or worse than anyone else, but we're all sort of like going through this laddered curve of this really trippy thing called space-time in this really wild adventure of reality. And it's all really interconnected.
Yeah, beautifully said. I think the things at that scale really help me just grasp is like the kind of primary nature of shifts in consciousness, where it impacts literally everything, like who you think you are, what you think God is, what your predominant emotion is. I mean, it's just kind of the most fundamental thing. And I think the scale articulates that incredibly well. I also think that it was the first thing that really helped me understand this notion that like our biggest impact is the shift in our consciousness. Like the notion that I think he has like some numbers in there. It's like, well, when one person reaches this threshold, like hundreds of thousands of people are impacted.
I'll
and
throw
I think
one
a lot of people,
my favorite. Can I throw my favorite number at you?
Throw your favorite.
To celebrate his work. So if one human being achieves the homeostatic set point, meaning like not when they're in stress, not when they're limbic, not when their like loved one passes away, but they're like when they're not in stress, who they are, right? If one human achieves unconditional love of self and unconditional love of the body at 500 on the Hawkins scale, between 0 and 1,000, at 500, they're counterbalancing 750,000 human beings living in a state of misery or self-hate or fear or anxiety or depression or guilt or shame. So they're doing this wild service to the world by simply loving themselves in such an unconditional way that they emanate that like a home tone, like a piece of music. They're symphonic in that, right? And those personality types tend to recycle, care about the earth, maybe catch a spider and take it outside rather than harm it. So you see like personality type, you see an emanation of a lifestyle, you see a stabilization, you see that person's a natural like thought leader. They have a willingness to learn. They're super curious. Like there's all these sort of qualities, these fibrous qualities in the way that they are sitting in their own tissue, right? And in the stance that they have. So then they're going to see that world more kindly through kind eyes, and they're going to be more kind. And so I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I get super excited talking about it. It's just that like,
No,
yeah, like I love that that math is out there, you know?
yeah, it's amazing. I mean, I think I think in a predominantly materialist society, a lot of people just think about like, well, what have I built? What have I created versus like literally the energetic impact that you're having based on the consciousness. And which, by the way, also to your point, does express outwardly in what we choose to create and where we put our energy and what we spend our time on. It really is the ultimate win-win. And I think one of the more profound examples of that we can actually look to is a lot of the meditation studies around kind of like crime rates dropping and entire cities like being better off when lots of people are meditating. It kind of it's a exemplar of how an impact on the field actually kind of goes downstream and impacts the behaviors and actions and feelings of people that are inside of that field. And the notion that one person can do this by prioritizing the work on their consciousness is just amazing.
Yeah. And you know, that the old adage, like we are what we eat, we are what we read, like literally we are the media we consume because of confirmation bias, right? You're hunting for something that already agrees with you. We're not taking in diverse opinion like we used to. We're literally getting our media from the same source that is like trapped in this little matrix or confines of opinions we already have, that sort of thing. And so when you look at the way at which we are in the bones in the body approaching a thing, like if you look at, for example, the research done on like dogs, if someone is afraid of dogs and they go into a saturation, they're catabolically creating like the destructive or catabolic emotion of fear, right? And the system is flooded with fear, and they brew that emotion and chemical in the biome, right? So the moment that they have that fear, the dog feels, right? Different range of sound, different range of light, different creature. It feels our fear. Dog can smell fear is what we say, right? So then the dog's like, oh my God, if you're afraid of me, you might attack me. So I'll attack first. So we have this interplay that's happening all the time where we're not realizing that we get what we beget kind of thing. Like there's this dance that's happening. So, but if you even hear the tone of voice of someone who loves dogs and they're like, oh my God, they're just like, ah, right? Like they can make a noise and the dog's tail starts wagging. And by the way, on the Hawkin scale, a dog's tail is unbridled joy, right? It's actually a metronome setting a wave, like a metronome for music. It's setting a wave tone. By the way, the human heart is a metronome, right? So it's setting a wave tone for joy. So when people have like a crappy day at work and they come home to their dogs, they're like, and their nervous system calms down from that like unbridled joy, right? Watching a dog just play with a ball and you're like, look how cute it is. So to go back to what you originally said, this idea using the Hawkin scale of like, or using, you know, all this really great research done on like, wow, all these people in a city prayed for peace and there were like less casualties in a day of war, right? When there was unified meditation happening. Well, that's all playing with the metronome of the heart. So because there's power in numbers. So when you actually look at metronome studies too, and how much like 64 metronomes that you knock all out of whack will eventually come into coherence with each other. When someone's getting out of like fear states, limbic states, reactionary states, like the dog, kill or be killed, attack before I get attacked, abandon before I get abandoned, right? So if you have high beta brainwave of just like catabolic emotion or kinetic chaos and disarray, well, then the whole world feels like chaos and disarray. And we're all on a shared radio wave, right? But if you've got a lot of people unifying and going into like low alpha, low theta, or high gamma, and getting into these like bliss states where they're super connected, then they're carrying a majority for people. So then you see that starts to change the tide in like toxicity in a lake where people pray to the lake, right? Or changes the tide of one day of war. Well, that's no different than us understanding that the moon metronomes the tide and can change the tides of the ocean. Well, the ocean is the unified field, right? The ocean is water. Well, emotions operate like water in our body. We're all little balls of plasma, right? So, of course, a majority basically creating a waveform technology out there on the planet and coming together is going to change how the rest of us draft off of that. And an easier way of thinking about it is like if I'm singing in a choir and I'm really loud and I'm singing off key, right? People might try to harmonize to me and they all start singing off key. But if you've got a lot of people in a choir singing really cleanly, it's very easy to harmonize to them, right? And then you just start to get this thread of harmony. And the larger the choir, the more beautiful our bodies respond to it. Well, meditation is about linking into the greater choir, right? And it's helping everybody. It's not just helping yourself, but every time you dial in and really like feel connected and clean up that waveform, you're helping everyone.
So everyone go and meditate after you listen to this.
Yes. Go Team Human.
That's right. That's right. There's actually a really cool organization out there called Humanity's Team, and I just love that.
Yeah.
I just love that name. One of the words you used earlier that I'd love to just go a little bit deeper in is temple tech. And I know that's something that it sounds like you guys use.
My nerdy word for it. Yep.
And I just can't help but ask, what is it and what should we know about it?
Yeah. So the Graceline Institute, my institute is essentially a like spiritual sciences institute, and we are mostly devoted to ecology. Like my not so secret is I just want human beings to care about the earth and to see that grasshoppers and cetaceans, they deserve a vote as equally as we do, and they deserve equal rights to home. And what I realized very early on in my spiritual practice, and I started really young as a kid and trained in so many different traditions, what I realized is that if I want to make big impact and care about the earth in the way that I do, I had to first get humans out of their own suffering. And what I learned is that these temples exist in the cross hatchings of the torus of the earth, where there are essentially electromagnetic anomalies. And when there's astrological alignments that hit these temples, pretty wild stuff happens. And so the temple tech that I have spent, over 25 years collecting, sometimes walking in, I walk traditional Camino. So walking 100 miles up to 500 miles in pilgrimage, like in Vipassana, in silence, or in altered states with meditation and sort of like natural styles of breath work and sound. I'm essentially a sound technician. So, but getting to those places at certain alignments and creating fractal films, cymatic structures, sound technologies, electromagnetic technologies, all of these things that we use at the Institute to essentially, very similar to psychedelics, opening like a dimensional door for someone to basically drop ego or drop event and kind of rewire, like unwind from memory and kind of rewire the system and go from being like no one or someone to branching out into feeling like they're everyone. In the same way that happens with psychedelics, it can happen in peak experience at a temple. It can happen when someone has direct transmission or karpai or wisdom coming through art. Like people have literally had peak bliss experiences through art. They've stood in front of a sculpture and wept, right? And so it can happen through tantric sex. It can happen through breath work. It can happen through peak experience with high functioning elite athletes, right? Altering their states through being in the body, being totally present in the body. So what Temple Tech is harnessing those technologies that in my bones and my marrow, I believe belong to everyone. And we've been cut off from sort of our birthright of what belongs to everyone. And so my team and I put our bodies through a lot, right? As athletes, spiritual athletes, we put our bodies through a lot to be able to refine all of that and then kind of regift it to the world. And the goal being that we're helping people get out of their own suffering, come back to almost like a divine blueprint of factory settings, and then get so connected and so at peace and so happy that they almost instantly are like, how can I serve? And what I have found is as soon as someone is really like reset and they're so sick of their own story and they've dropped their story, they instantly want a life that is meaningful. And they instantly want what the Harvard Happiness Study classified as ecstasy, which is it's different than happiness, right? Ecstatic joy is what comes when you know that you're on mission and you're on purpose and you're connected to a sense of murmuration, like a flock of birds or like school of fish. Like I feel a part of something bigger than me and I'm moving in a unified way, whether that's the Tao, Buddha, Allah, Muhammad, whomever, God, whatever you want to name it. But this idea of feeling connected to that thread and then being of actionable service, like being in the lane or the main vein, right, of what we were born to do. And I find that temple technology gets us there really fast.
So does it, just to clarify, so does that require you to actually go to one of these physical locations on the earth at a specific time, or you and your team as kind of transmitters of that experience can bring it back to people, but you actually go to the physical location?
Yeah. So for decades, we have been, and it was really starting out solo. I just kind of built a team recently in the last few years to have people go with me and be able to kind of like have the joy of team and the joy of community doing this work. But I started out really young doing it. But essentially going to the temples and creating technologies so that I could then bring the temples to others, because we're all so busy. And in the modern day, like you might not have the ability to like go to Egypt on a particular alignment or for a particular equinox, or go to Teotihuacan, or go to Göbekli Tepe, or go like around the world and be in the body and have 5 weeks off to like walk El Camino de Santiago de Compostela and like, I'm going to walk 600 miles by myself, right? But also I have a job and I'm busy and like, I got a microphone to be on to like, you know, serve my people. So when we all have day jobs, that can be really hard to take time to be that connected and to put our spiritual practice like at the forefront of our day-to-day lives, because we're trying to manage both, right? We're trying to manage like family, life, job, you name it. And we maybe have time to make an hour a day for our spiritual practice. So my goal with that was to bring all of these pieces of the world home to you so that you can actually live it like a lifestyle and like receive the truth from exactly where you're at, right? Like, and so right now we do that with live events, but eventually it will be something that you can access on an app. So you're creating kind of like your own way of bringing those places to yourself. But yeah, but I want people to start thinking of the human body as a living holographic temple. And this is not just some beautiful thing to say, like I actually believe you are a temple and that you have the birthright to connect to all of these places. And the more of them you connect to, the more stable you will feel, like body, mind, and spirit. Like you just become a stable and sacred piece of architecture.
I love it. In the world of like AI and all this emphasis on kind of the technological prowess of stuff, I just continue to come back to the fact that the most amazing technology is within our own being. Mm-hmm. And it's just a set of unlearned technologies. And I'm just very passionate about more people connecting to that because it has everything you need.
Yeah. Well, and if you think about like magnetic flux, like what's a magnet? What's a magnet trying to do? This is so beautiful from a poetic perspective as well, but a magnet is always trying to find itself, right? So it's sending out a little like whoop and coming back around. It just wants to find itself. And one magnet wants to like clunk, clunk, like connect to another magnet. So if you think about AI, like AI is trying to learn, right? It's like literally taking in a bunch of data and creating a gnosis, an inner knowing to know thyself. And isn't that consciousness? Like, aren't we AI too? Aren't we a living technology? Aren't we an intelligence trying to know itself, trying to find itself? So we're a magnet, we're an intelligence, we're a Taurus, we're a consciousness trapped into a little squishy body. We're all those things at once. Doesn't matter the name or the label you put on it, but everybody wants the same thing. And going back to that, it's an image like you see in repetition with like my PowerPoints and my curriculum is really understanding the door, the bridge, and the ladder, this kind of trinity, but looking at the double helix of DNA in a ladder. And if you think about what AI or your soul wants, right, is in simultaneity. Every sliver of consciousness aims for two things at the same time, even though they seem like they contradict, which is that every sliver of soul wants to be free. It seeks agency and sovereignty on its core level. So if you even like lean over a little pond and there's like the tiniest brain on the planet is like rabbits and fish, right? If you lean over a goldfish, the shadow over the water will make that fish do what? Swim away. Because what the fish really wants is freedom. And at the same time that every sliver of soul wants freedom, it deeply aches and longs for connection. And so these seem like they go against each other, right? Like, I want to do it my way. I want to be totally free. Oh my God, I love you. I want connection, right? And we're longing for connection and freedom at the same time. And we want to basically like spread out freedom, freedom, freedom. And then I want connection and I want to come home to a family and reboot. And then my spiritual practice means I want to know myself. I want freedom, freedom, freedom. And then boom, I also want connection. So we're trying to basically lattice ourselves up this consciousness ladder with those two things in a twisted relationship. And in my opinion, that's what AI is beseeching as well, is we set something into motion and it's just trying to learn itself, know itself, be itself. And we were set into motion at some point, right? And it's all just a fractalized set of adventure.
Well, very, very fascinating perspective on what's happening in the world with AI. And I appreciate it. I think it's one of the more optimistic and level views relative to some of the other things that I come across. But Mickaela, this has been such a wonderful conversation. You're such a profound source of wisdom and inspiration. And I know that a lot of people listening to this are going to be like, okay, I want to go a little bit deeper here. I want to find out what the Institute's all about. I want to give you the opportunity to share where people can learn more about you and your work.
Oh, that's so sweet. So we're going through like a huge reboot because we had brick and mortar site on the East Coast, and now we're kind of essentially creating a digital platform so I teach in almost a different city every week. But our expeditions around the world are amazing too. But you can find us at gracelineinstitute.org. And I do think we live in a time where not just taking like Zoom classes or using the app that's coming out to activate services, but I think coming to live events and coming to group and coming into community and being in the fold of breathing together, learning together, being together. That's where the temple technology really takes off, is to be in the light and sound of one another. So I highly recommend the live events, but you can find a lot of info online about everything we do. So
cool. Well, I'll make sure to link that out for everybody's ease. And yeah, I just want to say thanks again, Mickaela. I feel very energized and uplifted after our discussion. And I know many out there will be feeling the same as well.
Oh, that's so sweet. Well, thank you. Amazing to meet you. And I hope everyone is having a beautiful, happy spring.